Today after 2:30, we've got an interview with James Dean Bradfield of the Manic Street Preachers. There's been a flurry of interest about this saying. Shug says, will you ask JDB if he's repaired his trousers following the splittage at the Royal Albert Hall, perhaps for the Rock Trouser Museum? Wasn't aware of this. Then few people have got involved. Catherine Rogan says, if he hasn't repaired them, I have a great deal of trouser mending experience. Manic has joined in as well. This is the most important question of our time. I'm afraid let's be honest, we recorded the conversation yesterday when I was unaware of the trouser splitting incident.
He split his trousers on stage at the Albert Hall, did he?
I mean, if I'd known about this, I would have certainly quizzed JDB at length about it.
Of course,
But I'm afraid...
Well, if you're listening, James...
And you want to get in touch. I think they're in... Is it Leeds tonight? They're in Leeds tonight,
right,
the guys.
Right, OK.
And then Swansea next weekend, which I'm hoping to get to. So if you're listening, guys, because they do listen to us...
Yeah.
And you want to phone in JDB with a trouser update, please do.
PJ Probing, wasn't it? That was his trademark on stage, splitting his trousers, wasn't it?
JDB emulates PJP.
There you go. All right, what a snappy headline.
So, get into it. Anyway, but there is a chat I had yesterday with him. He's on great form. They're on great form. And it's 20 years since the release of their landmark recording, Everything Must Go. I think it's out today, the deluxe box set in the shops. It's a beautiful thing. I'm talking to JDB a bit later on. Well, I have in front of me, James, a gorgeous-looking package. Everything Must Go, Manic Street Preachers. Are you delighted with this artefact?
I'm just really delighted that Mark Farrow, who designed the original album sleeve, him and Nick have kind of disassembled it and put it back together. And, I've got a few things in the house which I keep on the shelf, and this is one of the things that went straight on that special shelf, the box set kind of thing. It is gorgeous because it's actually, the way it was designed, it was quite minimalist in its nature kind of thing. So to actually put it back together and just make it better was a tough job, but I think Mark and Nick, really achieved that.
I mean, the story is well known, James, and we have to go over it a little, but just to say, where were you when you were recording this? I mean, physically and mentally. I mean, there was, I guess, a point when you reconvened and thought, what are we going to do? And what shall we do? And shall we bother at all, I guess? Did that happen? Was there a single meeting?
I mean, there was just a terrible feeling of being in limbo, I suppose. It was kind of... Obviously, in the background, there was just much heavier stuff happening than the emotions that we were going through because, obviously, of his family and of our friendship, etc. And then you had the third factor of, on top of that, of thinking, well, is the band going to exist anymore? So there were different layers to what was actually going on with Richey's disappearance, which made it more complicated. There's not a sob story, it's just the way it was. And eventually, it was just, I think it was a phone call between myself and Nick. There was just a decision that was made that the only thing that could be a signpost as to what might happen was that if we could still write songs.
It's not just a great record, but it's somehow... It's bigger. It has a kind of monumental dimension, kind of almost like philosophically now, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, kind of... It's a touchstone in terms of... Well, I suppose, Nick felt, that things were drifting in lyrically at that point with, the kind of the rolling kind of carnival of Britpop fast approaching, there was that kind of slight, I suppose, he was viewing stuff that Blur were doing. Yeah. And it was just like, whilst not being disdainful of it and whilst not even disliking it, just felt as if there was too much working class caricature with it. And I think it's really all the serendipity that kind of happens around these things is kind of quite spooky when you think about it. I mean, I think Jimmy McGovern was having quite a big effect on Nick at that point, just to see somebody who would take in these kind of real working class, subjects and turn them into popular culture. I think Nick was viewing that and thinking, wow, it can be done.
It can be done.
So it's very strange when you look at all these things, it's a perfect storm, really. And obviously it started with something terrible, which was Richey going missing. And when you look back at it, you see it, and it looks like a story. It doesn't feel like a story at the time, but it actually looks like a story with an arcs of characters and third plays and stuff, and it's quite strange,
Yeah. And the odd thing is, you get slightly co-opted into that bandwagon of Britpop, which I always thought was kind of hilarious in a way, but it did happen, didn't it?
It did happen, and to be honest, I don't think we had much of a problem with it. I really don't. You know, I can admit that there's one track on Everything Must Go where I can hear an Oasis influence, and something like an All Alone. I don't really think would have turned out like it did unless you know, I hadn't listened to the first Oasis album, you know, so much. Yeah. So you've just got to admit those things. But I remember we were playing in Cologne on a European tour. And there was a poster, and it was translated. You know, it obviously said Britpop stars, Manic Street Preachers. And whilst other bands might have just kind of like just gone, oh no, we are not. We just went, hey, well, there's more bums than seats. We don't care, you know. And I've always been quite. I've never quite understood when bands look back at periods and go, oh, we hated being pigeonholed. It's just like, for God's sake, you know, there was a lot of good music that was getting to a lot of people, and you were all making money. Shut up. Like, you know, I can look back and say we weren't a Britpop band, and I can say we've reclaimed it a bit, but at the time it didn't bother me.
And now, you said you've always wanted to do a football song. I think I read a quote that said you always wanted to do a football song.
Well, look, you know, we do have some kind of like place where kind of music and sports do get fused together. I mean, I think for 4 or 5 years, Australia was used on the Nationwide League Goals Roundup.
Was it?
Yeah, it was a hit. And I used to watch it because, you know, Forest were down in that league for quite a while.
Of course, yeah.
Because I was much more active Forest supporter back then. And Australia was used on the Goals Roundup for the Nationwide League for 5 years. I think we'd always loved that thing. There was the Lennon McCartney quote. It said, there was that quote where sometimes they would say, let's do a swimming pool song, which meant let's just do a massive smash hit. You know, and it's kind of, me and Nick always just had a thing that we just, there used to be this thing, I think it's called Lakeside Shootout, which was the music that was used on the golf on BBC Two back in the 80s. Doom, 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 doom,
I know the one you mean.
Doom. And it sounded like late era 80s, you know, krautrock. It was really cool. Yeah. And we always kind of like, we always had this inkling that kind of like sport and music really can go together, that shiny, glorious moment. So this is continuing that theme, basically. You
once said to me that your family first took you seriously as playing the guitar when you played the theme from the snooker to them. Is that right?
Yeah. Down, 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 bam, bam, bam. And my dad, Monty, kind of one of the greatest men in the world, my dad, he just went, bloody hell, son, you can play that guitar well. Yeah.
For people who've not heard this record before that we're going to play now, what I loved about this when I first heard it is you hint at "You're Just Too Good to Be True" in the first verse. Yeah. That's very smart with the arrive and alive thing. That's very clever.
It's all Nick's doing. He's kind of like he's the alchemist. He's the weaver. He just throws lyrics into the room, and like a hungry boxer dog, I just chase the music that should go with it.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks, James.
Cool.
Chris Coleman's men have freed...